So mastery, Zen and other masteries. And this is the first of what may well turn out to be 2 or 3 talks around mastery. And so I thought I'd start with a infinitely wise and infinitely profound remark by the Zen master with whom I'm most familiar, the great Magid Roshi, or Barry, as most of us know him. Barry has said from time to time, just, sort of, why Zen? How do you get into Zen? Whatever, of course. And part of that answer is, of course, I always wanted to be Gandalf. So I thought we'd start there and just ask about Gandalf and mastery and the Lord of the Rings. I'm going to take it for granted that you got some idea of the plot, that you've read the book, seen the movie, had somebody else describe it to you. So I just point at the things that interest me. Gandalf is, of course, the good wizard who's right at the centre of the Lord of the Rings. In some ways is the centre of the Lord of the Rings, partly because he's the only one who knows the real backstory, partly because he's very often the only one who has actually much of a clue what's going on. So though he's not actually the hero of the story, he's the centre of the story, and he's way the coolest guy in the story. I think we'd have to say that. For so many reasons. People rely on him, people look up to him, people respect him. He has powers, the most trivial being the ability to blow technicolor smoke rings from his pipe. But they extend considerably beyond that. And Gandalf gives us a sense of competence, confidence, because he seems, much of the time in control. Also puts us in touch, I said, got powers with the world of magic, with which Buddhism in general and Zen in particular has this kind of, not so sure about that relationship. But actually the world of gods and spirits, actually they turn up in Japanese Zen a lot, because there's this strong tradition of local gods, the kami, spirits of place, so spirit of a tree or a spring or a mountain. And of course the other thing, if we talk about the Lord of the Rings, is, it's a story of the struggle of good and evil. It's a war, it's a battle ongoing. And, we have that in Zen as well. We have the Shaolin monks and the flashy, flappy robes, and So actually it's going to turn out to be a few kind of interesting parallels. Maybe why Barry felt Gandalf was the guy, Gandalf was the man. Zen Master Gandalf. And this is to say right up front that our idea of mastery is what Barry calls a curative fantasy. You don't necessarily want to be Gandalf, but we all want to be in control. We all want to matter into our own lives, and preferably in other people's too. We all want to have a sense that we matter. We all want a sense that we're in control. And that may well be why we come to Zen. And I suppose, I have to say, probably me too, actually, hands up. Saying, that sounds cool. Be Gandalf. Go for that. So, curative fantasy, fix me. Control, take control of my life. What kind of, all those unruly thoughts, all those strange emotions that I'm not quite sure about. Situations where I feel stressy or unhappy or like a failure or can't do it right or Hopefully Zen will sort all that out for me. And of course it doesn't, but that fantasy of mastery, that delusion that mastery is out there to be grabbed, like Gandalf, is what drives us on. It's delusion, but it's necessary delusion. It's just part of the way we are, part of our lives. And then we get, hopefully, at some point, disenchanted about that delusion. That, oh, heavens, that's what I was doing all along. And then maybe we wander off somewhere else. Or maybe we just stick with it and see what happens. Allow that delusion to change and morph. And I don't think it ever quite goes away. And maybe for you, it wasn't Gandalf. Maybe for you, it isn't Gandalf. But something. We could say it's my others I want to fix, I want to control. All those parts of me that I'm worried by. Maybe I'm afraid I am really like that, or maybe I can see that I'm too often like that. Or maybe other people are telling me that I'm like that. All these kind of fragments of other me's. Maybe they're memories of the past. Maybe they're fragments of possible futures that I never led. All kinds of ghosts and wraiths. And of course we get ghosts and wraiths a lot in The Lord of the Rings. And in fact, one of the central features of those is the rings of power, the 9 rings given to mortal kings who die, but don't die. Because the power of these rings, turns them into ghosts, prolongs their life infinitely, but at the most unbelievable cost. And of course what's significant about these rings is they've been made by Sauron, the Dark Lord, specifically to control them, because he has the one ring, the ring of power. And there's this wonderful little rhyme that Tolkien gives us about that. Comes back and back in the story. One ring to rule them all, one ring to bind them. Sorry, how could I possibly get that wrong? One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness, bind them. And in one sense, that's a really nice definition of mastery, because it's about control. It's bringing all these wraiths that are me together, and yes, one. Bring them all together as one. And so often I'm going back and back and back to the idea of not separate. And not separate sounds like one, but it's actually the opposite of one. So let's think about a little bit more about one, as in this one ring, the ring of power that Sauron possesses and loses. And in losing it, loses most of his power. And that's the story, obviously, of the Lord of the Rings. What happens to this ring and his attempt to get it back. But the point of the One Ring is it's the centre. It's the absolute centre. It's the embodiment of power. It's the possession of which allows him to enslave these mortal kings across the earth and keep them as effectively ghost puppets that will do his will infinitely. And it's obviously connected with Mount Doom and the all-seeing eye. There's this wonderful, we have the image of the panopticon, this centre from which you can see everything going on. And it's a wonderful kind of prefiguration of our modern interest in that. This tower from which you can see everything, and this eye that never sleeps but rotates and scans. A bit like Google or Facebook, really. It scans all the data, it sees everything, draws it to itself, processes it. It's knowledge. It's knowledge as power. It's knowledge as power as control. And of course it is control because it's basically a master-slave relationship. Sauron enslaves the mortal kings. He enslaves subject peoples. They do his bidding not because at the simplest level they want to, but because he holds the power of life and death over them, whether that's as violence or as magic. He creates a desolation, a wasteland. Mountains that are void of life, plains that are void of life, except his minions going about their business. It's an industrialised landscape, furnaces, making more weapons, making more vehicles of war. Fire, furnaces, smoke, choking out the life of everything. You could say it sounds a lot like industrial capitalism. It's clearly got references to the dark satanic mills that William Blake was talking about a century or so earlier. And it's knowledge as control, as this master and slave relationship, this relation of mastery. The master is at the centre, the slaves are dependent. The master sees, the master acts, and the slaves carry out their objects. If the master is the subject, they're just objects, all other beings, which he plays with, configures, disposes of. The other thing is that it's not like he's just happy to stay within the land of Mordor, his destroyed, industrial, messed up kingdom, but looks for world domination, wants to carry out the same process absolutely everywhere across all the lands of Middle-earth. Elves, dwarves, Ents, humans, hobbits, all these different kinds of being. They'll have to stand for different ethnicities, different cultures, because these are mythic, these are fairy tale. But in this sense, this is the point, the erasure of significant difference, the erasure of the importance of place, of connection, of family, of anything other than this knowledge as power and control. So to expand endlessly, because there can be no end, because frankly, with mastery, what's the point? Ha 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 ha, evil laugh. I have enslaved you, you will do my bidding. Great. What's the point? Where's the life? Where's the connection? Where's the interest in any of that? Ha 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 ha, I've laid waste to another country. Great. I think there are more interesting things to do. Mastery is nothing, and yet it can consume us. And in a sense, where I started, the questing is all of us for this curative fantasy of control, of mastery. And where does it get us? Death. Emptiness. Not in a good way. Not in a Buddhist way. Death. So let's compare and contrast Sauron and Gandalf. Gandalf doesn't have this infinite power. He doesn't have this wonderful ring with which he can control everyone. In fact, if we think about it, Gandalf's strategy is the opposite of control, always. It's actually like running a real sangha. It's like herding cats. He has to persuade stupid parochial hobbits to go on quests for thousands of miles that last for years. Why? Why would they do this? He has to persuade dwarves who spend their lives underground to come out and do the same kind of thing. It's a pretty thankless task, actually. To us, he looks really cool. I think for most of the people around him, most of the time, he's just plain annoying. And he works with different peoples in their own terms. You have the immortality of elves, you have the technical skills of dwarfs, you have men, and we'll come back to why it's important that it's men. But these differences, and yeah, at one sense, it's like mid-20th century Europe, lots of squabbling nations. And at another sense, it's, the exploration of cultural difference. The fact that all of these peoples do come from different places. They want different things. They have different priorities. And we have to talk, and we have to discuss, and we have to try and build something out of this disparate mess rather than reducing everything to the same, to one. Now, okay, I think we have to point out that J.R.R. Tolkien was a professor at one of the world's greatest universities, at the heart of the world's greatest empire that it had ever known, which had, of course, become the greatest empire by colonization, conquest, enslavement, exploitation, expropriation, the rest of it. We know the story. And so there's this kind of ambivalence here at the heart of the book, because, and the vision that it's promoting is a kind of alternative vision, is of kind of merry England. It's a kind of England as it never was, of villages, which are the hobbits, really. And yet, of course, that in itself speaks to the very traditional English, European way of looking back to the past. This is unfair, this is unjust, because it didn't used to be like that. So we talk about return to a mythic past. And actually, hey, we're back at Zen again, aren't we? Because, the golden age of Zen was 9th century China. It's over 1,000 years ago. And we hopefully, perhaps, look up to, but if you read the ancient masters, they tell you go beyond the Buddhas and patriarchs, Don't look back at that stuff. Come on. Do something. Act. Say a word of Zen. Speak. Here, now, appropriate. So Zen both looks back and looks forwards. And I said about the races of men. And of course, one of the most obvious questions you can actually ask at the Lord of the Rings is, where are the women? Well, it's a mid-20th century adventure story, so of course there aren't going to be any women in it. There are a couple of token princesses, and jolly good characters they are too, and that's great. But mostly they're obviously indoors, underground, wherever, doing, the kind of work without which you can't go off and fight battles, build nations, whatever. And that's like Zen too, because... And it's lovely that we're now writing books about women Zen teachers and the great stories about women of Zen. And that's fantastic. All part of that. But equally, let's not pretend that there ever could have been a parallel women's Zen tradition in what was an absolutely patriarchal culture. Medieval China, and the same with Japan. And in fact, if we're thinking about that, they were cultures without any great cultural diversity either. Unified under very strong rulers, or at least that was the intention. Not always the case, because you have these long periods of civil war, which are maybe a little bit like the Lord of the Rings themselves. But if you read the Zen stories, the emperor, the figure of the emperor as the absolute ruler and the embodiment of the relationship of heaven and earth, and also maybe sometimes a bit of an idiot, somebody who doesn't quite get it, and this wonderful tension and play within this. And in fact, you can see a lot of the same strategies cropping up within how we talk about Zen, the stories we tell about Zen, and the way that the Lord of the Rings actually works. And then there's the far west. At the end of the story, there's the far west, which we're told nothing about. It's over the ocean, crossing the river, to come back to a kind of Buddhist image. And it's where the people who've had intimate contact with the ring or other sources of great power go towards the end of their lives. They just leave. And we're not really told anything about this in particular. It kind of figures as paradise, kind of figures as a beyond. But it's the other place. In that sense, it's the other place that we're always looking for. If not mastery, then safety, peace, rest. The other great curative fantasy that we're after. And get back to our own founder, Joko Beck's great teaching. No, this is it. Get used to it. Don't look to the beyond, the other place, because this is it. If not right here, right now. What else is there? No escape. Horrifying teaching when you really begin to get your head around it. Really? Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, infinitely liberating. It would be easy to tell the story of what Zen is really trying to do if we accept that we're not all out to dominate ourselves, dominate the world, achieve mysterious powers and enlightenment as some kind of combination of Sauron's power and the peace and rest of the far west. And it would be easy to say this is the struggle of good and evil. Evil mastery, bad people. See what's happening to the planet? Absolutely. Catastrophe. And yet, of course, it's not as simple as that, because, in a sense, what Zen is always trying to do is undercut that distinction. Sides. Not separate means no sides, no good and bad, no us and them, or only provisionally so, and in ways that we begin to understand. And so we can say, no, mastery is me, it's my curative fantasy as much as it's Sauron's, as much as it's, Google's, Facebook, Shell Oil, whatever. It's all part of the same thing. And maybe that's the point, whether I'm talking about my own fantasies for myself, or how I think my relationships with other people should be, or the state of the planet. It's all me. It's all not separate, not in a one way, but in this kind of infinite play of difference that I am. This infinite play of difference that you are. Not separate from yourself, not separate from each other, but not one. I suppose, come back to that, the Enso, the Zen circle. Please understand that we can never see that as the ring of power, as one in that sense. Actually, the opposite of that. So no us, no them, no all-seeing eye, no control. Zen mastery is no mastery. And that's the teaching.